Chapter 3, Olympus Coliseum. The pair walked in silence. The stagnant air made it a little hard to breathe. There was nothing to be seen in any direction, only a thick, gloomy mist obscuring their vision. It felt like they'd been walking in circles for ages. Namine tried to look around. Maybe they really had, she thought. Axel?
Yeah?
His steps never paused. Where are you going?
Our base of operations,
Axel replied, over his shoulder this time.
What are you going to do?
She gazed straight at him. What do you mean?
If I return with you in tow, I get to live without being branded as a traitor,
he said with a wry grin. Maybe. Axel, what do you want to do?
Avoid getting eliminated, ideally.
So you're offering me up to the organization?
Well, you see any other options?
His expression was frozen in a forced smile. He had no ideas. He didn't know what to do. And he had no heart, and thus no emotions to guide him either. I have a request, Namine said, determined. I want to meet Kairi. Axel frowned. Namine was a nobody. If she met Kairi, her true self, Namine would disappear.
Are you serious?
Well, she looked at the ground. Isn't that only natural?
Then what did you want to come with me for?
Axel flung his arms out angrily. Because you seemed lonely.
What?
The irritated furrow between his brows deepened. You seemed lonely, Namine repeated, raising her eyes.
Lonely? Me? A nobody? Lonely? That doesn't even make sense.
You know, Axel, I wonder if we really do have hearts after all.
Yeah, well, that's impossible.
He turned away from her.
We don't have hearts. Still, I know that feeling. I was lonely. I've been lonely since Roxas went away. Does that mean I have a heart? Is that what makes me feel this way?
Axel, Namine began.
Sorry to bother you when you're so busy, but...
The sentence was finished not by Namine's voice, but a man's. Axel looked up to see someone else he knew. He hadn't even sensed him coming. Saïx, he snarled, and the other man slowly lowered his hood, smiling serenely. Long blue hair escaped from the hood, but it didn't hide the scar on his forehead.
Namine, run!
She flinched at Axel's shout and took off. Ahead of her was a portal in the air. Axel!
It's okay! Go! I'll catch up.
Namine nodded and jumped into the gateway.
So you're trying to play the hero now too?
Saïx said flatly, staring hard at Axel. Number 8 gripped his chakrams, hoping he'd at least buy some time. Enough for Namine to find Riku at least. He edged backward, step by tiny step. If he was being honest, Axel didn't think he could win against Saïx. The best he could do was to find an opening and make a break for it.
What are you gonna do now? Saïx asked, watching the portal close with no discernible reaction. Nothing that's any of your business.
Saïx shifted his shoulders.
I beg to differ if you're going to betray the organization.
So are you saying I'm not already a traitor? Axel smirked.
We can't let you turn the hero into a heartless. Huh? What are you talking about?
Apparently they weren't having the same conversation. The organization's objective was to recover Roxas, the wielder, and have him under their control, wasn't it? Well, to be precise, the goal was to use Roxas's Keyblade to destroy the Heartless, collect all the hearts, and regain hearts for themselves. Then did this mean the organization had given up on Roxas? If they had Sora, they didn't need Roxas? Was that it?
Our goals are constantly evolving,
Saïx explained dispassionately, taking a step toward his retreating target. In response, Axel leaped back.
Oh yeah? Huh. That's news to me. So what are your orders this time? You can tell me.
He mocked as he started to create something behind Saïx. To the naked eye, it appeared to be nothing but a black dot. He jumped away for a reason. He just needed a little more time and distance. And the blue-haired man wasn't the type to attack without any provocation.
My orders are to take you down.
A heavy sword materialized in Saïx's hands, and he closed the space between them in one leap. Not the brightest, are you? Now that Saïx was in very close range, Axel sprang right over him and ran. The setup he'd planted was just ahead now, a distortion in the air steadily taking shape. He knew he had no chances of defeating number 7 in a fight, but he had every confidence in his own speed and cleverness.
What?
Saïx whirled around, but Axel had already plunged into the warp. The trio disembarked from the gummy ship into a world they'd never seen before. Gee, this place is new. Goofy cocked his head. The almost completely lightless expanse was strewn with boulders. It seemed to be a cave. There's the way out! Donald pointed to a large shining gateway at the top of a staircase.
Looks like there's a door over there and a rock too,
Goofy said, directing their attention in the opposite direction. Over that way, they could see a sliding door made from a single block of stone. Which way should we go? Wondered a confused Sora between the two. Just then, a scream pierced the air.
Whoa! Sora, heartless!
Goofy raised his shields and charged. Near the stone door, a woman was on the ground, surrounded by Heartless. Whack! Donald joined Goofy, fending off the Heartless. Are you all right? Sora went to help her up, but the woman shook her head and stood on her own.
Thanks, but I'm fine. Who are you supposed to be?
I'm Sora. That's Donald, and that's Goofy. We're trying to find our friends. She nodded and glanced up to the door atop the stairs before introducing herself.
Name's Megara, but you can call me Meg. I'm a friend of our local hero.
Hero? Donald regarded her curiously.
Yeah, the hero of this world. But he's about to run out of heroics.
Who is he? Asked Goofy.
Hercules. He spends all day, every day, duking it out in the Colosseum up there.
Still staring at the bright door, Megara sighed. The trio exchanged glances. Duking it out with who? Sora asked. Heartless?
No, Hades just keeps sending him tough customers. Monsters, really.
Hades? At the unfamiliar name, they looked at one another again.
The Lord of the Underworld,
Megara explained.
I was on my way to have a chat with him just now. Maybe I can get him to give Hercules a breather, if anything happens to that kid.
Gosh, sounds like you're more than friends, Goofy said.
What? No, we're not,
she retorted, a hint of color in her cheeks. Sora folded his arms and looked up at the night. Well, we can't just leave someone down there when she's trying to help out a friend. Well, they're not just friends, Goofy pointed out. Then we definitely can't, Donald snapped. We'll go talk to Hades for you, Sora declared. Megara's head rose.
Really? Well, I guess I'll take you up on that.
Leave it to us! Sora boastfully jabbed a thumb at his chest, and Donald and Goofy followed suit. Okay, let's go! They nodded to one another and wrenched open the stone door. At the same time, deep in the bowels of the underworld, its ruler Hades had a visit from a familiar character.
So, what you gonna do about Hercules? He's making mincemeat out of every fighter you send.
The guest was none other than Pete, pacing around restlessly and muttering to himself.
Pretty soon, the underworld's gonna be standing room only. Sheesh, I guess by now there's a whole lot of new warriors down there.
Hades scowled contemptuously at Pete's ranting. The Lord of the Dead was tall with a sickly blue complexion, and his hair blazed with hellish flames. Before Hades and Pete was a pit-spouting yellowish-green mist, along with a rotten stench. Pete scrunched up his face in response to the smell.
So basically, I've got a full roster of fallen warriors to put back in the game, mused Hades.
What do you mean? Pete demanded, crossing his arms in an attempt to seem confident.
See this hole in the floor? It's a portal to the underworld's deepest, darkest dungeon.
Hades peered down into it with a nasty grin.
Which means I can call up the baddest of the bad whenever I want.
You don't say, mumbled Pete, even as Hades' grin sent a shiver down his spine and shrank back. Hades let out a sinister chuckle, either at Pete's fear or at his own scheming, and waved his hand at the pit. A crackling bolt of light blasted from his hand and down into the depths. Pete crept back even farther from the uncanny roar that followed. "You don't say," he cowered, covering his face against the awful reek and flash of eerie light. At Hades' near maniacal cackling, Pete peeked out from between his fingers and saw a man dressed in red and holding an enormous sword. A terrible wound on his face had permanently closed his right eye, and his graying hair was cut short. His left arm was tucked into his robes. "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Not-So-Nice Guy. I've got a deal for you," Hades told him cheerfully. "Do what I say and you're free as a bird. No strings attached." The man shifted his attention from Hades to Pete. "Eep!" Pete retreated a step, unnerved by the penetrating one-eyed gaze. "It's a walk in the park, really," Hades went on, teeth still bared. "Go to the Colosseum and fight Hercules, to the death." Unflinching, the man lifted the corners of his mouth into a hint of a smile. "This is my story, and you're not part of it." He raised his sword squarely at Hades. "Did you forget who you're talking to? I am Lord of the Dead." "Right. No wonder no one wants to die." At that, Hades' flaming hair flared up red with anger. "You are fired!" he shouted and lunged at the man. Sora and his friends headed deeper and deeper into the dreary caverns, taking down Heartless along the way. "A lady shouldn't be in a place like this all by her lonesome," Goofy said, knocking aside with his shield any Heartless that jumped at him. "No way, no how," Donald agreed, and with a flick of his wand, another turned to mist. "Anyway, do you get the feeling we're not as strong as usual?" Goofy examined his shield as if it would tell him the reason. It's just your imagination," Sora replied breezily and rested the Keyblade across his shoulders. "Or maybe it's just you." "Gosh, I guess so." Goofy cocked his head, unconvinced. "About this hero, though, Hercules. I wonder what he's like." Sora gushed, obviously intrigued. "Well, gee." Goofy folded his arms, musing. "Probably tall and handsome and really nice." "So, the complete opposite of Sora," Donald jeered. "What? Hey!" Sora began chasing him. "See, you attack your friends!" As Donald fled, he collided with something and fell back on his tail. Quack! "Oops, sorry about that." The person he'd run into bowed his head apologetically. "Huh? Gah!" When the trio noticed the man's organization cloak, they readied their weapons again, and he took a step back. "Retreat!" he shouted. At that, some squirming nobodies showed themselves, and they simply continued down the passage Sora had just come from, completely ignoring the three. The organization man followed his minions. "What was that about?" Sora squinted after him. "Wasn't that somebody from Organization 13? Goofy asked. "Must have been." But Sora was confused, too. "Look, there's the door!" Donald announced, peering down where the man had been. Sora and the other two stood there before a huge door, much like the one at the gates to the underworld where they'd found Megara. "You think Hades is through there?" Goofy said. Sora and Donald nodded. They opened the door and peeked through the gap. "Someone needs help in there!" cried Donald. In the large round chamber, a man with graying hair was lying on the floor. Beside him stood another man, tall and bluish-skinned. The trio scurried inside. "What do you think you're doing?" The tall man had flames for hair, which blazed an angry red. Hades glared at the newcomers. "I could ask you the same thing," Sora retorted and dashed in front of the man on the ground to cover him with the Keyblade. Someone else popped out of Hades' shadow. "It's you, Pipsqueaks!" "Pete!" cried Donald and Goofy. "I knew you were up to no good!" Sora braced for a fight. "Hades!" Pete yelled. "It's them! The ones trying to interfere with our plan!" "Oh yeah? That's so." Arms crossed, Hades grinned viciously. "I take it you're friends with Hercules or something?"
So you're Hades. Well, we're here to talk to you, Sora began. No, go now, the fallen man muttered to him. We can't do that. Goofy went to help him up, but Hades glided over and tossed Goofy aside. Blizzard! Donald flung out a spell, but the blast of ice melted away before it even touched Hades' robes. What's going on? Sora sprang forward to attack, or tried to. The strength drained from his legs, and instead he tumbled over. We can't do anything, shouted Donald, waving his wand in vain. I feel kind of funny, Sora mumbled. He couldn't even seem to get up. You finally noticed. See, that's a thing. In the underworld, heroes are zeros. Comes with the territory. Hades crowed and struck at Sora. Ugh! The one who blocked the attack from Hades was the man who had been on the floor. Hades laughed, knowing he'd scarcely have to lift a finger. Still got that much fight in ya? Run, now, the warrior in red shouted. But Sora protested as he finally got to his feet. We can't fight him here. Listen to me. We have to go. Sora, Donald, and Goofy gave in and fled the chamber. What about that guy back there? Sora worried, checking over his shoulder, and the man in question was only a little ways behind them. Goofy swiveled his head too, ears flapping, and grinned at Sora. Oh, good. We made it. Donald stopped to catch his gasping breath. Did we lose him? Don't count on it, the man replied. He's right. Come on, the party's just getting started. Hades had appeared beside the magician without a sound other than those mocking words. Whack! Pete brought up the rear with the passel of Heartless. Hold it right there! Run for it! Sora cried. The four of them started to do just that, only to find Heartless in front of them too. Whoa! Sora skidded to a halt, but the mysterious man was already charging ahead to mow down the Heartless with one strike of his huge sword. Wow! Donald marveled. Let's go. The man wasted no time, and they scrambled to follow him. Hey, mister, you're pretty good, Sora said as he caught up. The man cracked a lopsided smile. Say, are you a hero? Goofy asked, and at that the man stopped in his tracks. The other three paused with him as if following his lead. I'm no hero. I'm just Auron. Auron? Donald echoed. That's my name. He sounded a little embarrassed. The trio confirmed that they'd all had the same thought, then scurried around in front of him and stood at attention. I'm Sora! Donald! Goofy! They introduced themselves one after another, and Sora stretched out his arm to shake hands. But he'd reached toward Auron's paralyzed left arm. Oh. Seeing Sora awkwardly stuck there, Auron let out a tiny chuckle. We must have been fated to meet. Maybe you need a guardian. Guardian? Thanks, but pretty sure we'll be fine. Sora withdrew his hand and rubbed the back of his head, grinning. Mm-hmm. Auron laughed a bit more noticeably this time. Anyway, let's move. Right! They plunged ahead again. Meanwhile, up above, bright sunlight filled the Colosseum. There were no games now, and someone from the organization crept through the quiet arena. Demyx hadn't been able to use his power in those caverns, as if the place was under some kind of curse. Actually, come to think of it, before he came to this world, Xigbar had been going on about some kind of talisman. The Olympus stone, that was it. I don't know, I'm just not cut out for this kind of work. Ah! Suddenly, a stout little man with goat horns on his head was standing in front of them. What are you doing here? Demanded the satyr. Well, you know. Caught out, Demyx scratched his head. You here for the games? Name's Phil. And you are? Leaving. Demyx dashed for the stone building that served as a prep room for the contestants. Hey, hold it right there! Phil started in pursuit, but found himself beset by a ring of nobodies. What do you think you're doing? Demyx ran inside as Phil shouted after him. The gate! Donald called and ran ahead to it with the party close on his tail. Uh-oh, it won't move! He shoved the door with all his might, to no avail. Here goes!
Goofy added his own strength, but the door still didn't budge. Apparently, it was not just closed, but locked. There was a sizable keyhole in the middle of it. Looks like we're stuck. Goofy looked back at Sora mournfully. But Sora's keyblade gleamed. Oh! He held it up.
Can you open it with that?
Auron asked, watching their efforts.
Yeah, I think so.
But the moment Sora spoke, a dreadful growl sounded from behind them, accompanied by an even more dreadful stench. Whack! Donald started at the sight of the source. It was the giant three-headed guard dog of the underworld, Cerberus. Auron calmly faced the beast with his sword ready.
Go!
He shouted to the others and leaped into action. Sora nodded and raised the keyblade toward the keyhole. The weapon glowed and unlocked the gate. Come on, Donald cried and shoved the door open.
Auron?
Goofy called. The warrior was busy doing battle with Cerberus.
Just go!
We can't leave you behind! Sora charged at Cerberus and leaped into the air, slashing at one of its eyes. The giant monster dog roared. Tch! Auron hissed in frustration and charged from the other direction. Sora and Auron both launched themselves up to attack Cerberus's two uninjured faces.
Let's get out of here, Sora.
Right! Auron dashed toward the door with Sora at his heels. Behind them, the wounded Cerberus crept closer. Hurry, Sora! Shouted Donald. They heaved the door shut in Cerberus's faces. Sora stuck his tongue out at the closed door and grinned. So there! Huh? Donald looked this way and that. Where's Auron? Goofy scanned the cavern too. Auron should have made it through the door with them, but he was nowhere to be seen. He's gone? Sora searched the premises. No Auron. Well, Auron's pretty strong though. I bet he can take care of himself. Let's go find Meg, then we can try again. Donald and Goofy nodded, and they climbed the stairs from the gate of the underworld to the shining Colosseum. Beyond the door atop the stairs, the great stone Colosseum spread out before them. Gee, this sure is something else. Donald sighed, gazing up at the towering walls. I wonder where Meg is. Goofy started toward the center of the arena. I want to see the hero. Sora ran ahead. The two figures standing in the arena, one big and one small, seemed to be involved in a serious discussion. Come on, champ. Excuse us. Goofy quietly spoke up. Be right back. The smaller one went trotting right past the trio. Gosh, I wonder what's going on. Goofy mused aloud, just a bit nervous.
Hey there. Who are you?
Somewhat at a loss, the taller one looked down at the newcomers. I'm Sora. Donald here.
And Goofy.
The tall person smiled at their cheerful introductions.
I'm Hercules.
So you're the hero? Goofy asked.
Well, yeah, I guess I am.
Hercules laughed bashfully. He wore brown armor over his daunting physique, his blue eyes and white teeth flashing. He gave off an imposing aura, every inch the hero. Sora stared up at him in awe. We're looking for this lady called Megara.
You're looking for Meg?
Yeah, the boy nodded.
Oh, then...
Hercules turned, but just then someone appeared out of a dark mist. Hades! Cried Sora, taking a stance with his keyblade.
What's wrong, your hero-ness? Feeling under the weather?
Hades said to Hercules, blatantly ignoring the trio.
I thought staying in shape was part of the job description.
Hades, we gotta talk! Sora insisted, but the Lord of the Dead continued to act as if he didn't exist.
I came here to share a little rumor, Hades went on. Seems your darling Nutmeg went and got herself lost in the underworld.
You mean you kidnapped her? Hercules glared at him.
Why get caught up in the details?
Hercules whistled and a winged horse swooped down into the arena.
Where do you think you're taking off to? You got a very important match today against the bloodthirsty Hydra.
Hades gave him a wicked grin.
I mean, if you don't stick around to fight it, who knows what kind of accidents might happen?
Not exactly accidents when you're the one causing them, Sora interjected.
Like I said, details.
Hercules clenched his fists.
You're nothing but a coward. Oh, well, we can't all be heroes.
Hades snickered and snapped his fingers, taunting the hero, then vanished. Hercules groaned in frustration and hit his fists against his thighs. We can handle it, Sora told him, absolutely confident.
But, are you sure? You kids don't really look all that tough.
We're sure, Donald pounded his chest boastfully.
Besides, we were just in the underworld,
Goofy added. Hercules regarded them anew.
You were?
Yup, Sora nodded.
Except, we couldn't really fight. Hades said it was something about the underworld.
Hercules folded his arms in contemplation and then spoke.
There's a stone that guards against the curse of the underworld. The Olympus stone. The gods on Mount Olympus use it when they have to go down there. But it was stolen.
He frowned. Huh? Who took it? Sora asked.
We don't know yet, but Phil said he saw someone fishy.
Who's Phil? Donald asked. Hercules looked in the direction where the small, stout person had run off to.
I was just talking to him. He went to follow that man. I couldn't stop him.
What was this fella like? Goofy asked anxiously.
Phil said he wore a black cloak with a hood over his face, and he had an entourage of these quick little minions in white.
The trio looked at one another. A black cloak and quick little creatures in white? The organization!
Somebody you know?
Sounds like he's one of the bad guys we're fighting, Sora said bluntly.
Really? Well, maybe I could ask you to help Meg then.
Hercules finally seemed to accept that the newcomers were going to save her.
Say, if we can get back that Olympus stone, do you think we could borrow it for a while?
Goofy asked gingerly.
Sure. After all, you'll never be able to face Hades without it.
Hercules told them with a smile. Sora, Donald, and Goofy all nodded, determined. Okay, don't worry, we'll save Meg, Sora announced.
I'm counting on it.
Hercules shook his head. Let's go after Phil, Sora said, and they descended back into the gloomy caverns. And there at the gate of the underworld, they found Phil sprawled out on the ground. Phil!
Ugh, huh? Oof.
Goofy ran over and helped him up. You okay? Donald anxiously peered at Phil.
Yeah, more or less. But who are all you people?
Phil glared, apparently taking them for suspicious characters as well. I'm Sora, and this is Donald, and that's Goofy. Hercules sent us after you. We're gonna catch the Olympus stone thief and save Meg. Phil skeptically raised his eyebrows.
Really? The champ sent you?
He sure did, Donald bragged. Anyway, leave that guy in black to us, Sora said. Phil still appeared uncertain at first, but then he finally seemed to give in.
Okay then, if the champ said so, I guess I gotta believe him. That guy I was following ran straight into the underworld.
Thanks. The trio headed for the stone door. On the other side, they felt weak again, even weaker than before, but the Heartless kept on attacking them.
This underworld curse is really getting to me,
Sora sighed, finally finishing off the Heartless in front of him. We've got to get that Olympus stone back, fast! Donald clobbered a Heartless with his wand instead of using magic.
What if we don't find that organization fella before we run into Hades?
Goofy worried. Then we'll have to deal with it somehow, Sora proclaimed with the confidence he had absolutely no reason to feel.
Oh, hey, it's you!
Called a boyish voice.
Huh?
Sora spun around, and standing there was a man in the organization issue black cloak, flanked by nobodies. Going by the voice, this wasn't the same one they'd spoken to in Hollow Bastion. He didn't have a very threatening impression, and his hair was almost too long to stand up in spikes the way it did.
Roxas?
Demyx said timidly.
Roxas?
Sora had never heard the name, if the word was even a name. Baffled, he cocked his head.
Excuse me?
Roxas? The man asked again.
What's he talking about?
Goofy whispered to Sora, who shook his head. Who knows? Donald raised one eyebrow. He's bonkers.
Oh, well, no use, is it?
Demyx shrugged, plainly ignoring Donald.
What's no use?
Sora demanded, but he seemed to ignore that too. Demyx took out a piece of paper, skimmed it, and then rolled his eyes.
If the subject fails to respond, use aggression to liberate his true nature. Boy, did they ever pick the wrong guy for this one.
Distressed, the man scratched his head.
You're not making any sense,
Sora burst out. Again, Demyx made no reply, but only held up a round stone that resembled a medal. It had to be the Olympus stone, Sora thought.
He's the thief,
Goofy declared. Demyx hunched his shoulders as if offended.
Now that's just plain rude.
In his hand, the Olympus stone gleamed.
Whack!
Donald started at the gang of Demyx clones that appeared, but the doubles weren't solid. They were transparent.
Let's get this party started,
he crowed, and 3 of the lookalikes started whirling around.
Donald, Goofy, let's get 'em!
Sora rushed the doubles and brought down the Keyblade. They splashed like liquid and scattered.
Are these things made of water?
Sora sputtered, soaked in what used to be his opponents. Let's see how they like getting frozen. Blizzard! Donald flung a spell at them. Goofy spun around, whacking them with his shield.
Oh man, I told them this isn't my kind of job.
Demyx clutched his head in frustration, watching one after another of his doubles splashing to the ground. Sora took the chance to charge at him, weapon at the ready.
Yeep!
Trembling, Demyx backed away.
Hey, come on, Roxas! Look, nobody knows what that means.
Well, Demyx cocked his head to one side, and then the other, cracking his neck and brought his face closer to Sora's.
I'll just say it. Roxas, come back to us. Who in the world is Roxas?
At Sora's obvious irritation, Demyx scurried backward and vanished into darkness. In the same moment, the remaining doubles lost their shape, dissolving into ordinary puddles on the ground.
What a funny fella,
Goofy said.
Yeah.
Sora lowered the Keyblade and stared at the ground. Roxas. It felt like he'd heard that word, but he couldn't put his finger on where. And yet he already knew what it meant, or he wouldn't have asked that question. Who in the world is Roxas? It was someone's name, someone he knew probably, except he'd never met or heard of anyone called that.
What's wrong, Sora?
Goofy asked, his expression filled with concern.
Oh, nothing.
Sora laughed it off.
That guy was really weird.
Goofy smiled too, while Donald scrutinized the cavern floor.
Oh yeah, the Olympus stone.
Sora ran over to Donald.
Didn't he take it with him?
Goofy said. It's right here. Donald picked up the shining stone and handed it to Sora. He held up the Olympus stone aloft, and the light emanating from it surrounded them.
Gosh, did it get rid of the curse?
Goofy wondered as sparkles rained down on them.
It must have. Let's go. Meg needs our help.
Donald and Goofy nodded, and the trio ran further down into the underworld. In deep in the darkest pits, they found Megara being held prisoner. Meg! As they dashed toward her, they realized she was chained to a rock.
Sora, behind you!
She cried. The trio turned and came face to face with Pete.
Can't fight in the underworld, can ya? Well, isn't this my lucky day?
Pete stalked closer with a swarm of Heartless in tow. Sora grinned and readied the Keyblade. Not that lucky.
Charge!
Pete commanded, pointing at the trio. You want to fight? You'll get one! Sora and Goofy took on the horde, while Donald stayed behind to work on freeing Meg.
Ha! Yeah! Take that!
Sora cut down Heartless after Heartless and soon had a path straight to Pete.
Hey, weren't you supposed to be all weak and wimpy down here?
Pete complained.
Sorry to get your hopes up.
At Sora's self-assured reply, Pete broke out in a cold sweat and began to back away.
Ugh, this place is a dump anyway. I'll get you twerps next time.
With that parting shot, he turned tail and ran.
Hey, you're not getting away!
Sora tried to chase him, but yet another enemy rose up in his path in a billow of smoke.
Hades! Would you look at that? Bunch of tough guys now, huh?
Hades sneered. Suddenly, a bright voice echoed through the dungeons.
Sorry I'm late.
The one making his gallant entrance was Hercules, along with his winged horse Pegasus.
Oh, at last, our hero. One little problem, though. Down here, you're a zero. You're about to find out how wrong you are. Hercules charged him at full speed, sword in hand, and attacked. What gives? Hades yelped. Whoa!
The battle ended as quickly as Sora's exclamation, and Hades collapsed to his knees.
All right, you win. At annoying me,
Hades roared, and blue-white light spouted from under his feet, swallowing him up. Hercules turned to the trio with a grin.
So what do you think? Was that heroic?
It was amazing! Donald hopped in delight. Megara, finally out of her shackles, flew into Hercules' arms.
Gee, feels like we didn't even help that much,
Sora mumbled, a tiny pout twisting his mouth. That moment, the Olympus stone gleamed and floated into the air, where its light became a keyhole.
Another gate's open!
Sora lifted the keyblade and shot a bright beam at the keyhole, and they heard it unlock. After the light disappeared, the air in the underworld returned to its usual gloomy state, and the Olympus stone, as if having finished its work for the day, tumbled to the ground.
Here, you'd better take this back.
Sora picked it up and handed it to Hercules.
Thanks. But who are you three?
Hercules wondered. We're heroes, replied Donald. Meg smiled at them.
Sure looks that way to me. Okay, sure,
Hercules said.
Junior heroes.
The trio exchanged glances and grinned too.
Well, time for us to go,
Sora told Hercules, and then they set off on their journey to another world.